The Charlotte Hornets took the headlines of this year's draft by selecting Brandon Miller at number 2, and then they had a very interesting draft with the rest of their picks. Starting with what everybody is talking about, Charlotte's first draft pick of the night at number 2, Brandon Miller. The Alabama scorer was the favorite for the number 2 pick all along, according to the Hornets front office, but there will be many who feel like the team should have selected Scoot Henderson instead. I am among them, and I definitely had Scoot over Miller on my big board, but at the same time, the discussion is more so about where Miller was selected. Other than that, he does profile as a great fit next to LaMelo Ball and potentially some of Charlotte's other picks. For one, Miller's shooting immediately gives the Hornets a dimension that the team was lacking. The 20-year-old can be a great floor spacer at the next level. In college, Miller made 38% of his threes, taking 7.5 triples per night. Miller was efficient while pacing his Alabama team in scoring, and I think he'll ideally be taking an easier shot diet in the NBA, with more spot-up looks created for him by LaMelo Ball and others. In particular, it's LaMelo who's very skilled at generating threes. In his All-Star season 2 years ago, he was 11th in the NBA in three-pointers assisted. That puts Ball in the company of the best passers in the league, such as Trae Young, James Harden, Luka Doncic, Russell Westbrook, or Chris Paul. As for Miller, he has improvements to make. The biggest one is no doubt his creation, generation, and scoring at the rim. That really has to get better, and he struggled with this all season long in college. This is particularly apparent in the half court, given that some of his improvements as the season progressed were more so in transition. Miller is not particularly explosive, and his handle is solid but with plenty of room for improvement, some of which should happen as he gets stronger. Still, with his 3-point shooting, flashes of pull-up shooting, and decent facilitating, he gives the Hornets a fairly safe floor. Down the other end, Miller is a solid enough defender. He's not a stopper, I don't think, but by no means is he a sieve. He's big at around 6'9", and he's mobile as well. The Hornets already have pretty good defenders with size, so I think Miller's athletic limitations will be covered up. He also needs to get stronger on this end, but it's going to be great for Charlotte to add somebody with positional size, effort, and awareness on this side of the ball. Nick Smith Jr. arrived in Charlotte with the 27th pick. The former 5-star recruit had an underwhelming freshman season at Arkansas, but I think a lot of that can be attributed to the circumstances. Smith struggled with knee issues for most of the year, and there were questions over whether he would even suit up for the Razorbacks at all. When he came back at the end of November, it was only for 5 games, and then he had to sit until February again. So Smith never found any real rhythm. On top of that, he never looked 100% either, so by the time he got back into the team, it was tough to really find a stable spot for him. However, much like Brandon Miller, although more at the 1 or the 2, Smith should complement the rest of Charlotte's pieces very well. The first thing to note is how he plays off the ball. That already gives him scalability next to LaMelo Ball, as well as Brandon Miller. Smith can attack closeouts, usually with this floater. Hornets fans, get ready to see a lot of this shot. And although it is a consistent make, Smith is going to have to be careful to rev up his aggressiveness and not be overly reliant on this shot in the NBA. This was definitely the case in college, even if it was on a small sample size of minutes. Much like Miller at Alabama, Smith at Arkansas also had difficulty getting to and finishing at the rim. But I'm optimistic that some improvements will come through his health and the increased space of the NBA. Smith is still going to have to get stronger though, definitely more assertive, And most importantly, I expect this to take some time. I think that the new Hornets guard in general showed that he has good touch. Other than floaters, there is a pathway to him becoming a good shooter down the line, but the numbers never quite correlated with that during his freshman season. At the end of the day, Scoot Henderson is definitely the higher upside pick. I think he's a surefire future All-Star, but I can understand the logic behind picking Miller at 2, and then buying the stock, which I'm also doing, on a previously very highly ranked recruit like Nick Smith Jr., whose game should fit the NBA like a glove. The Hornets selected James Naji with the 31st pick. The Nigerian center played sparingly for Barcelona in Spain this season, and I highlighted him all the way back at the start of this draft cycle as one of the best international prospects in 2023. That still applies, but Naji has gotten very little playing time over the last season, especially when you compare him to other top centers who also got drafted this year. I'm very much in on the new Hornets big, but this also seems like a longer term move. For one, he needs development, and like I said, playing time. But also, Charlotte already has somewhat of a logjam of bigs, or adjacent types, such as Nick Richards, Mark Williams, Kai Jones, and JT Thor, so they're still trying to figure out what to do with all of them. Down the line, it's evident that Naji has a clear NBA role. He'll be a play finisher who already has a league-ready body despite not even turning 19 until the middle of August. So eventually, Naji is going to live in the dunker spot, catch lobs, and bully his opponents on the glass on both ends. On defense, the hope is that he becomes a vertical two-way player given his huge radius, pop off the ground, strength, and flashes of being able to guard in space. If I had to compare James to somebody in the NBA, it would be Jalen Duren, but keep in mind that Duren has had infinitely more chances to make reads on both ends at higher levels. At this point, I would love to see Naji play Summer League with Charlotte, but it would probably be in his best interests to be bought out from Barcelona and then get stashed somewhere else for at least a year where he can reliably get on the court. Finally, the Hornets wrapped up their draft night with Amari Bailey at 41. I've highlighted the former UCLA guard twice on here before, whose freshman season had 2 chapters. The first one was one in which he adapted to a role that was totally different to how he had been playing. In high school at Sierra Canyon, Bailey was a floor general who played with the ball in his hands and had ample liberty to make pick and roll reads, spread the floor, push in transition, and so on. But in Westwood, the ball was largely in the hands of Tiger Campbell or Jaime Jaquez. In turn, that meant Bailey was filling in the gaps more often than not, or playing much more even like a wing than a guard sometimes. On defense, he was more sturdy than I think a lot of people give him credit for. But I think that it's in March where his season peaked at the perfect moment. Around tournament time, Bailey started getting to the free throw line a lot more. He improved his driving and his finishing at the basket, and he started converting on his signature mid-range shot at a much higher clip. After the end of the season, Bailey also had a pretty strong NBA draft combine. He measured in at over 6'4" in shoes, which is solid size for a guard, with a 6'7" wingspan. More crucially, he played very well, making high-quality reads as the primary ball handler on his team, manipulating defenses, and showing his understanding of ball screens. Bailey can use a pick to facilitate for others, but he can also use it to get into his shot. Looking towards the future, Bailey's biggest improvement point is really his three-pointer. His 39% from deep, as well as the touch on his shot, both encourage me, but the volume is really going to have to increase, both spotting up and off the dribble. Like Nick Smith, Bailey is very much a worthwhile upside play, and I love that the Hornets drafted both of them. He was a highly valued recruit coming into college, only to play a very different role on an established team with very accomplished veteran players. But even then, Amari found a way to make himself valuable with his complementary passing, his on-ball defense, and then I thought he showed genuine improvement as the season went on.